Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneurs Show, where we celebrate the innovators driving change in the education industry. At Edison OS, we've worked with over 500 knowledge entrepreneurs to turn their edtech ideas into profitable businesses. Hi, Soundari. Good evening. Welcome to the Knowledge Entrepreneurs Show. Thank you so much for taking your time out to join me here.
No, lovely to be here, Jagmohan, and thanks for all the help and the pre-conversations. Really excited to be here, and I can see that you've done a whole host of podcasts. I think about 56 episodes or so. So,
Yeah.
really happy to be with a seasoned podcaster.
Thank you, Sandri. Thank you so much. It's my pleasure to have you here. 56 are published, 67 are recorded, so about 11 to go more. Yeah, I think yours is 68. But yeah, it's just conversations, and it's always thanks to the guests. It's not like one podcast or something, it's just like you get
Right.
on a call and then you talk for some time and then you record it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Soundri, to get started, if you can, walk us through your journey until the point that you decided to, take up entrepreneurship.
Yeah, yeah. I had a very typical South Indian middle class kind of a childhood, and where education was really important. So as long as we studied, we got away with anything else or not doing anything else at home. So I did BCom and cost accounting in what I still call as Madras, Chennai,
Right.
and then went on. And I always had this aspiration about doing MBA, and part of it was also in some, vision of having my picture in the covers of a business magazine kind of thing, one of those dreams.
Right.
So MBA, went on to do my MBA at IIM Calcutta, and I think in the initial years, very clearly enjoyed finance. Part of it was the lovely nurturing that my commerce professor and my economics professor at school did. They gave us a lot of leeway, encouraged us to read a lot of foreign books on economics and all that, and so that was very exciting to have access to that kind of material over and above your boring CBSE school books and all that.
Right.
Uh, so I give a lot of credit to them for nurturing that in a time and place when it was not so common. Um, and then in the early 20s, I started working with Unilever, with Lipton specifically, the tea company, and absolutely loved my job. While the initial designation was being a management accountant or a commercial manager, the work was much more holistic and gave a great feel of the business. I remember my first day right out of MBA school, and like when I first went into the job, I was posted to this factory called Kidirpur factory in Calcutta. It was a tea producing factory, and week one, I had no clue what a business is, what a factory is, and this I say despite my MBA,
Yeah.
because I had no work ex. I had
Right.
just studied and just gone into work, kind of thing. And in the week one, the uh, factory manager went on leave, and so the commercial manager, who was supposed to be my mentor and guide, he was busy running the factory, and so he didn't have much time for me. So he gave me this operations manual and told me to go and sit in a conference room, air condition and all that, and said, read this manual, kind of a thing. So it was this huge dome, a book, so which felt like more like a pillow rather than looking at the cut. And just that day, we also had the head of human resources for Lipton visiting the factory. And he asked me, so, what do you think about the factory? What are the packet sizes which are being produced? What do you think about the human resources issues and things like that? And I had no clue. So, it was like sort of a rude awakening that nobody is going to come and give you that knowledge, or, give you the content. You have to go and seek it.
Yeah.
And that was my sort of lesson and awakening to say that, oh, you're in a factory doesn't mean you have to sit inside a room.
Right.
You need to have your ear on the ground. You need to go there, be there, see what's happening, ask questions, be curious, be interested, and learn. So it was a great time, because right at the beginning of your career, it's okay to make all these mistakes and learn
Right.
from them. And then I went on to work in the legal and the commercial side, what is called commercial in Lipton. And some of my work at a certain point of time was focusing very much on legal and taxation,
Okay.
which I was not enjoying very much. And I remember one day that I went to the sales tax office in Greens Road in Chennai, and where we was made to wait outside to meet the sales tax assessment officer for like more than 8 hours, and there was a
Wow.
tax case going on. And it was frustrating because this just continued for a long time, where you're not doing anything but just waiting for audience. And then when I met the sales tax officer, he was like furious for some reason. It was a really toxic and bad meeting. So I came back from that and went into my office and typed out a resignation letter, printed it on a dot matrix printer, walked into my boss's room and handed in my resignation letter saying, I'm done. And my boss said, just looked at me and said, okay, I'm keeping it aside. Come and meet me for breakfast next day. It was at a five-star hotel. It was at Chola Sheraton in Chennai. And I was just thinking, oh my God, I can't even enjoy the breakfast because there's such a tense situation. So I go for breakfast, and he takes out in those times, and I'm talking about this is in the 90s, early 90s. Tissue papers and all were not very common. So this hotel had one. He took out a tissue paper and he drew X axis, Y axis on it and said, do you have a job in hand? I said, no, I don't. And he said, you're like a flight which is taken out without a destination in sight. So, where are you going to land? So, I want you to go back and think about what you want to do. If this is not what you want to do, what is it that you want to do? Come back with the more specific ask, and then we'll talk about this. And he just tore that letter and put it aside. And I think that was the great piece of mentoring that I really needed at that point in time. It was not, I was just obviously, being young and furious, which is for no point. And that really helped me ground myself. And this is something that I tell my mentees now, that, please plan. Don't just get worked up, be in the moment. It was great advice. I did do as he advised, and I found another role and I moved to ANZ, handling retail branches at that time. And a few years down the line, life, we all have different decision points in our life for various reasons.
Right.
And few years down the line, my husband got an offer to move to the Middle East. And at that time, I had my baby was like my firstborn was about a year old. I was really struggling with the time. We had ANZ and Standard Chartered had merged, and I had a huge role, and it was fantastically exciting. But I was not getting time with my kid, and I was trying to figure out what to do. And I remember walking into that manager's office and saying, there's this wonderful concept called job sharing. Can we look at something for me like that? He said, job sharing? What is it? What does that even mean? And I think these were all concepts which are still not there in corporate offices at senior levels. There's no concept of job sharing and doing, making it meaningful and all that. So I decided to take a break, but I also had that confidence in me. And there is a Tamil word for it. I know your audience is diverse. I will say it in Tamil and then translate it as well. Kurutu தைரியம், which
Yes.
is blind confidence in some ways. So I said that no worries, let's move to Bahrain. I wasn't keen for the family to be separate. I will find something. And that worked out for me because that was my first glimpse of looking at what is now called gig work or
Right.
freelance work or doing all these short term assignments. And I was sold on it. I said, this is the way to go in life. But it was also sort of partly easy for me to take that decision because I had worked for some time and I had
Right.
built a balance in my bank. So I had that estimation of what I could hedge against. What is that cushion that I have while I do these projects, while I establish myself? What would that mean? So that really started my journey into consulting. And then we moved to Hong Kong in 2006. It's like, instant love with this city in terms of its buzz, its vibrancy. My kids were really small, so once they settled into schools and the Hong Kong life, I really started building my business then, because by then I realized that this is a great way of flexing, but having a very meaningful business where I currently have a portfolio career kind of thing. But we will, I'll pause here for now and we'll talk
Yeah.
about that.
But before we go further, even I haven't heard about job sharing. Can you talk a little bit about job sharing?
Yeah, yeah. So, one early version of job sharing is when, like, say, just for example, I remember when I used to be in the bank in ANZ, we used to have a clearing department which had different times for clearing zones. So you had the
Mm,
high value clearing, which happened at a certain time. So you had somebody manning that desk, but that person would have to come really early in the morning to start the clearing process. At that time, things were all still, while it was computerized, it was still not computerized fully, kind of a thing.
right,
And then
right.
somebody will collect all the checks and rush to Reserve Bank of India to hand over the checks and all that. So that cutoff time ended at a certain point. And then you'd
Mm,
have the normal clearing. So you would have two people actually working on different times of the thing. Now, this was very common, but this is more common at a more clerical level.
right.
Job sharing in the way that I had looked at it, and I had seen a few examples of it in the UK, had read in a book. And I think to date there are really only a handful of examples where you have, just for example, two senior partners in a law firm sharing the same role. So if somebody comes in a few days, they have a overlap day. Their responsibility, their assessment of how it works is all joint. You're
Right.
all working on the same client, so it works at a very senior level. So it's slightly different. So the organization also has to figure out how to navigate it in terms of, one is a perks side of it, but also in terms of how will your performance be assessed, how will the client response be, because both of you will be talking to the same client. How do you maintain the continuity? And this is
Correct.
for very senior roles as well, right? So both of you need to get that sense of accomplishment in doing so. That is in just on how do you really manage it. And I see that as a very useful tool to bring in diversity into the organization, to give the flexibility. Normally when we talk of diversity, we talk about a lot of the time the conversation is around women, but men also need it. I feel a lot of the, in a very traditional form, a lot of the dads, for instance, also miss out on the growing up years of the children.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Right. But if you could really have that flexibility of working where it's still a senior meaty job, because we are all aspirational about the work that we do. The work has a lot of meaning. It's part of our identity in some ways. But at the same time, if we can have the flexibility to go and do other things. And I was just reading this. There's this person called Gary Bowles, whose father, Richard Bowles, had written this very popular book called What Color is My Parachute?
Okay.
And one of the concepts that Gary talks about, and which is something that we see, what if you're a person who's interested in agriculture, who wants to do engineering, and is also interested in space? Today, where can you go to find that intersection of those interests? No college will offer you a degree around this. You'll have to do three separate degrees, maybe. Then to find a way to combine all of it is difficult.
Yeah.
So he had actually asked ChatGPT to create a story for this fictional person who's interested in agriculture, who's has an engineering bent of mind, and who's interested in looking at space. So the story that ChatGPT threw out is about this girl who's looking at how tractors can plow the land better in her village, but by using space technology to navigate the tractor better, to use satellites as a tool to navigate the tractor and look at how can you get information from the satellites to farm better and things like that. So it doesn't have to
Right.
be fictional. So really looking at that intersectionality, how can you really have a career which has this, and job sharing and things like this really help you to have that multi-potentialite portfolio kind of a career.
Right. So, what was the response of your boss when you spoke about job sharing?
Oh, he just said, job sharing? What? And that's it. And I think I got my answer and I stopped talking.
And also, it's paying for two people for the same role, right? So,
Yeah,
probably the
yeah.
organizations
So
would
it won't
think,
be 2x. It'll be some version of it. It won't be 2x.
right,
Uh,
right. Some sacrifice
but
have to
yeah,
be
yeah,
made.
yeah. But some version of it for sure. But the organization has to see value to nurture the talent. So
Right,
somebody is such a key management personnel that you don't want to let them go. The
right,
downside is letting them go. And
right,
that we are seeing in these days in terms of people wanting flexibility and a lot of workforce quitting organizations and going. So you're
right.
losing talent, right? So this could be one of the ways in which you could retain talent.
Wonderful. This is definitely a topic to explore because I can already think of so many people, who'd love this. And there are companies today run by recent entrepreneurs, who will probably relate and agree to this. But
Right.
anyway, we'll park this topic for now. I'd like to come back to your journey. And when you said probably moving to Bahrain was a point where you had to come away from your traditional job, and then you had to go look something out for you there, right? So
Hmm. Hmm.
and then you said you got introduced to the gig culture or freelance culture and stuff, which is all right. But can you specifically talk about how did you translate a skill that is usually nurtured for an organization in a 9 to 5 sort of a thing into something where you are on your own, and maybe you'll be hired only by small businesses at the max, or you'll have to build up your way into big organizations. How did you navigate this transition?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question, right? Because some of the skills we use in organizations, or once we get a job, we don't use them. And I'll tell you more about the skill that we don't use, which is networking.
Right,
uh, Once we get a job in hand, we say, "Oh, ho gaya, that's it, we're done." I'll put my head down and work. And whereas we don't see that as an opportunity, oh, what can I learn from everybody else around me? Not just my own department, not just my own division, not just the people in my immediate vicinity. And I
right.
think that is the skill which you have. Everybody has in them when they get into an organization, but don't end up using it.
Yeah,
And that's a skill that really came in handy. I was already working with somebody and I was in the board of their company, but it was sort of a nominal role when I had my full time day job.
right,
So the same person was working somewhere in the Middle East, and he wanted me to work as a liaison for him in Bahrain,
right.
and in a role that I didn't know too much about the role that he was looking at, that area of
Hmm.
work I was not familiar with. But I said, why not? So it's also keeping in connection one with the people around you, finding out what is possible, and sometimes just trusting the process and jumping in, but equipping yourself in the back end. So I asked him, okay, you teach me, what is it? What am I doing? What does this area mean? What does a conversation with somebody in the monetary authority look like? What do I need to do? And like picking it up. But that one side, of course, gave me the flexibility to do as I did. And on the other side, I think a learning opportunity. It was a learning opportunity of building that. And by connecting with more people and talking about, this is what I'm looking to do, where do you think I should go and talk, who do I should I speak to, really opening your networks wider by putting yourself out there. And this
Right.
is something, though it is there with us, I think all of us have that skill.
Yes.
We don't nurture it enough, and it's almost like saying that, what is the point of digging a well after you become thirsty?
Yeah.
Do it do it right from the beginning. It's something that you need. How can you stay connected? How can you really make a meaningful connection rather than just being transactional about relationships?
Right.
And this is where also the whole, I think for me that was my prime skill, which came in handy both in Bahrain and in Hong Kong, of being open to possibilities, and like they say, life is sometimes understood only by looking backward, but we have to live forward. So as I look back now, I think that was the skill. The other thing that really came in handy is that one of my friends, she talks about advice that she got from her mentor, which is about following your compass, not your clock.
Right.
Today, in today's day and age, hopefully all of us will live, hopefully or not hopefully, I don't know, all of us will live to be 100 years. you know uh, so how do you really not look at saying that, oh, I need to make MD by when I'm 10 years into work, I need to
Right.
be CEO when I'm 15 years into work, I need to have all these artificial goals and guidelines? How can you really look at it more holistically, saying this is the quality of life and this is the richness that I want from my wheel of life?
Yeah.
And that's where I think carving that portfolio career. So I have three verticals in what I do. I have my consulting vertical, which is around organizational mindsets, behaviors, using storytelling as a way to help leaders and teams drive outcomes. And that's the vertical where I work with organizations. Then I have my teaching vertical, where I teach as a visiting faculty in a few colleges. Then I have my coaching, mentoring vertical. So really looking at, it's like catch is the catchphrase. So how are you consulting, advising, teaching? How are you looking at coaching? And H, I say, is help, which is be it as a mentor, be it in a lot of organizations, or to just have the time to be available to somebody who comes to you and says, can you help me with this?
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of it is monetized, but not all of it needs to be monetized. It could be a friend who's coming and asking you, saying, I'm really struggling to build my presence, I'm doing this, do you know anybody who can help?
Right.
You may be the person to help, you may not know somebody. Will you, for your friend, do that stretch to go and find out and help them? So
Yeah.
really creating those spaces as well where you can help.
Right.
So I think this is the kind of being very conscious about and intentional about how you want to craft your life.
Right.
What is the kind of time that you want to spend on what, and how do you want to bring that out as an investment? Similarly, keeping yourself very flexible on your dreams. And one of the things, there's this lady, Miku Hirano, who's the founder of a company called Cinnamon. And she says that fixing your dreams to your current mind and ability is limiting yourself.
Yeah.
So constantly keep updating your dreams so that as you grow and evolve, the dreams also grow and evolve. So it's not something that you do just now. Today I may be this, tomorrow I can be anything else.
Yeah.
So really opening. So I'm working with another friend on creating the series of conversations around AI and communication.
Right.
We are looking at how it is affecting artists, content, or content creation, ownership of content. How is it affecting organizational reputation as you go around using some of this?
Right.
And it is a conversation. Nobody knows the full answer.
Yeah.
Nobody is an expert. All of us
Yeah.
are navigating, but being open to creating that and keeping those black spaces so you can work on those, not keeping yourself, we have this thing of being extremely busy.
Yeah. And when you said help, right, for people who are not sure how to network, that itself is a networking activity. The unmonetized aspect of your life can well become your unconscious networking activity where you just have to be a little more conscious.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely. It's a great point that you picked up. I mean, I didn't touch on it. Glad that you highlighted it. That's how you build relationships as well, right? Being there. Sometimes I say, give, share, help. Um, Giving your time, giving your energy, giving your effort,
yeah.
sharing content, sharing your knowledge, sharing what I've read. Oh, I read this. Maybe this will interest you. Sharing videos in the social media kind of a world. It translates like this, but
Yeah.
you're doing that, giving, sharing, helping in those various ways. Yeah,
Right.
yeah, absolutely.
So, Soundari, you said about, your three verticals, which is organizational, where you help with storytelling for businesses, and then, your teaching, and then your training, you coach people, right? Now, of course, there's a long time has that's passed since you moved to Bahrain, and right now you've got so much of clarity. But it must have, probably even now you are still on your way to probably adding another vertical. But can you deep dive into how it came out to be the way it is right now? Like, did you start off with storytelling first and then move on to the other two things, or what
Hmm.
led to what?
Yeah, yeah. When I moved to Bahrain first, I worked with a few NGOs. So my friends connected me to somebody and say, "Would you like to work with us on this?" And I have this terrible habit, which I'm learning to control it to some extent, of putting my hand up for everything. I can't say no. It's useful initially, of course, which means you get a whole diverse range of experiences
Right,
of what you do. And then as I went about in Hong Kong, I also had to figure out what is relevant for this space, for this area that I am in. What is calling out to me, but also what the world needs.
right,
A little bit of the ikigai kind of a thing.
yeah.
So I looked at organizational consulting and I went and actually connected to every training service provider in Hong Kong. I
Mm,
must have had around 20 coffees to understand. And I just went there with literally almost like a notebook to ask them, so what's working well for you? What are your clients asking you? And just listening and learning. And almost all of them said, oh, sure, we'd like to find a way to work well together with you. And almost nobody came back.
but Sandri, what is the premise in which you set up these meetings? You are nobody to them. You're just
Yeah, I
randomly
said I've
setting up.
moved into Hong Kong. I'm looking to build a business. I'm interested in this area. Would you like to catch up for a coffee?
Wow. Okay. We're straight, very straight. No
Very
hidden
straight, very
thing.
straight. Yeah, 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 very
Right,
straight.
right, right, right.
I mean, I really didn't have a agenda larger than that.
Got it.
I just wanted to hear and learn. And it
Right,
would have been a good way also to check, oh, there's no work happening here at all. Let's just say I have this first coffee and somebody says, oh, it's a dead place, there's nothing happening here. Then I
right,
know
right,
that I'm like going down the wrong path.
right,
What I also did parallelly is attended a lot of events. So there's a lot of chambers of commerce in Hong Kong, like in a lot of other places. So they would have all these events where you can register and go and attend. You don't need to be a member.
right,
So I explored all those and I would go and meet a lot of people. Some of them, the topics will be interesting, or I'm interested in connecting with those people. So really intentionally, I would research on them. I would like check them out on LinkedIn and all, and then go and ensure that when the session is going on, if it's a session that I'm interested in something, I would actually be the first one to ask a question.
right.
I'd be the first one to walk up to them and talk to them. And that really also opened a lot of doors
Hmm,
in terms of connecting to people.
hmm.
Now, oh, you must be an extrovert. That's why you're doing this. No, I don't think so. I mean, I think definitely when I grew up in my schooling days, while I participated in a lot of competitions and speak, I was a very shy person. You might not recognize this now from all our
No,
conversations,
Sandri,
but
I can't, stop myself from bringing this very interesting point that you brought up, because people would naturally come and say, hey, you know what, you're an extrovert, you don't know how it is to be an introvert. I had a chat with another person a couple of weeks back. Her name is Indira Ramanidharan.
mm,
She's Bangalore based. She's a trainer, coach, and all. And she said, I'm a totally an introvert person and all those things, but I'm great at networking. And I was like, hey, something is not adding up. You're saying introvert and you're saying you're great at networking. Because for her, she said bringing sales was not a problem at all. Then she
mm,
told me this one line, which was like one punch dialogue from a movie. She said, no, extrovert means they talk unnecessary things and bullshit things. Introverts just go talk to the point. Whatever is needed, we talk and come out. That's it. It has nothing to do with talking to new people. And I was like,
right.
wow, okay, I never looked at it like that. So
No,
yeah.
very interesting. No, no, absolutely. I think these all of us are introverts and extroverts or
Yeah, yeah.
ambiverts and all that.
um,
There are times when we want time and space to ourselves, where we don't want to really have anybody's energy around us. There are
right,
also sometimes when really speaking to others. gives us a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And I have changed definitely over the years from what I was, that I do derive a lot of energy from the people around me.
Right.
Conversations really make a difference to me. So I won't label anybody in those two extremes or anything. Everybody is, it's shades of gray.
Yeah.
Everybody has
Yeah.
all that within them. But what I always also said is that a certain role requires you to behave in a certain way.
Right.
So it's role based, adapting
Yeah.
yourself to that
Yeah.
role and doing what that role requires.
Yeah.
And not being against sticking, labeling yourself or
Correct.
sticking
Correct.
to labels.
Right.
And so some of these really helped. Having those conversations, having going for these meetings and all, it built a wide range of connects to whom I could go and say, this is what I'm looking to do, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm interested in. And then also doing some certifications along the way, to
Right.
equip yourself, because you have to constantly update
To
yourself
build credibility also
as you're
sometimes.
doing. Yeah, yeah. So that combination of all that really help. It's not one or the other, and it's not, there's always this one saying about, how do things happen, right?
Right.
So there's this book called How to Find Fulfilling Work. It's by an Australian philosopher. I can't pronounce the surname, um, but How to Find Fulfilling Work is a thing. And he says that there is a mistaken assumption that a occasion usually comes to a person in a flash of enlightenment. You're lying in the bed and suddenly you wake up and you have something, or there's a God's
Yeah.
voice coming and saying, no, it doesn't happen like that. I mean, Mary Curie didn't have that miraculous moment of
Yeah.
insight. She dedicated all her working life to researching the properties of radioactive materials. What ultimately then really, the goal then creeps up onto you, and it's
Right.
about sustained scientific research in her case. So we have to stay in that discomfort and let things happen as we find our path.
Right.
And it's our own path that we build. And though occasionally people do have that epiphanies, apple fall moments kind of thing, these things build on you. And I think I'm still finding all of us are like work in progress in that sense. And to what you were saying, maybe there's another vertical that's waiting or a totally different vertical that's waiting. Uh, but really being in that discomfort, exploring it, taking it to a depth to see where it takes you.
Yeah. In fact, you answered something that I was gonna ask you. I was gonna ask you. Okay, you know what? You went to Bahrain. You said about this brief time when you were a liaison person for somebody, and then you moved to Hong Kong, and then you started meeting training people. But to go and meet these training people, you had to make up your mind that okay, you know what, training is probably what I'm gonna take up. And I was going to ask you, what made you get into training? Because your corporate life was completely different, right? You were an MBA,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
then coming into training. But you said it later that it's a series of events. It sometimes takes years of experiences to probably then you yourself don't realize, oh, how did I come back here? Or how did I arrive at this point? And those little
We
things
remember
add up, and
only
then
when we remember only when we get onto a podcast and somebody asks us.
right, exactly. Yeah. That too. Got it.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
Soundari, yeah,
sorry, I love working with people always. And
right,
over a period of time, as you grow in an organization, you realize that the domain expertise is very important. And probably all of us will have two, three depth of verticals that we go into. It's not just
right,
one.
right.
And what actually is the connecting arch? So I call it the M shaped leadership. So you have your two, three verticals that you're going into, and these connecting arches where you're connecting the dots across these verticals, you realize that whole part is actually interacting with people. So for me, it's the power of people, the potential. How can you work with them for them to really develop their personal best?
Got it.
And I think that is my slow build up movement to that point.
Right. If not for Bahrain, you would have probably been some management level, corporate person in one of the big companies or something like that.
Maybe. Who knows?
Maybe, yeah, yeah. That'll always remain a mystery. But
Yes.
Soundari, you spoke about storytelling. I was always going to get to that because storytelling is so important today. If you want to sell any idea, be it personal, professional, social, anything. Now, you're a storytelling coach. So, first of all, were you always a natural when it came to storytelling, or what was your self discovery process of that? And if you can just talk about that, and then we can continue talking about storytelling for a little.
Right. No, sure. I remember there was this Tamil actor from yesteryears called Shivaji Ganeshan, and he
Yeah,
was in one interview when Kamal Hassan goes to his house, another actor goes to his house, and he asks him, where did you learn all these skills? Because Shivaji was considered a very versatile actor and all that, and Kamal gives his analogy of saying that even to say somebody as a mother, we are told, or to call somebody a father, we are told this is your father, and then we say so. It's a lot of copying that happens. So where do you? And I think that's the whole range of influence. It's not one or the other. So when I'm working with leaders, for instance, I realize that the most effective leaders share a lot of examples to make a point. When I'm working with my clients, I used to hear that our leaders are not impactful in communicating change. They're not inspiring action. Our sales teams are talking like brochures. Our tech teams are very good in tech, but they're not communicating with the stakeholders, or they're talking in a language that only they understand. A lot of jargons. Our data analysts, the financial analysts, they work with a lot of data, but they're not sharing any insights from that data. So you hear all these problem statements which are building up over a period of time. So then you realize, obviously, looking at, oh, this is where the leader really communicated a point, and the way they did it was through a metaphor, through an analogy, through a story, through an example. You realize, oh, that seems to be a good technique. And then you see this happening, you see it at work, you read a lot of books, you see this, and then you realize that it is about systemically applying storytelling techniques to deliver business outcomes. There's this cultural anthropologist called Mary Bateson, and she says that the human species thinks in metaphors and learns through stories. So, if I were like telling you something, the fact that I gave you an example makes it connect and resonate so much better. So, storytelling is one great way also for a person to build a brand, to establish a trust. When somebody shares a story, that your brain lights up in a very different way. And in
right,
these days where we are looking for attention, comprehension, and retention of information, a story is that migrant which like a digital migrant, it sort of carries all that information and helps people remember.
right,
A lot of the times, I have this, friend who works in the education space as well, and we are always talking about some of these things, especially at in the education space, about how teachers can teach differently. How can they know the audience? If you make it too simple, you don't know where the audience is with you. If you make it too complex, you're losing your audience. So, how do you
right.
keep that communication really sharp, simple, interesting?
Hmm.
Kind of thing, and visual. So
Right,
stories are also visual. You can really imagine something happening. You can
right.
visualize it. It takes you to that point of action. So one of the things is really bringing it in at the right time to make a point. I know that you have a lot of audience who are teachers, educational entrepreneurs. So if I can just share
Yeah,
an example
please,
on
please.
how it is effective. Um, So there's this book called Weapons of Math Destruction by this lady called Kathy O'Neill. And she talks about a school that tried to use an algorithm to find the lowest performing teacher in the school, and they would let them go.
Mm.
Now, the example is shared in the context of the fact that you can't just use as data to make decisions. You have to look at the human aspect, you have to rely on your insights.
Yeah.
So, what happened was that one of the teachers, Susan, she was surprised that she was one of the persons who was going to be let go, though she had very high reviews from her students. She was well liked by her peers, her supervisors, but it came out that she was going to be let go. So they said that, let me dig deeper and find out. And it turns out that the algorithm couldn't identify that the low score was not Susan's fault. Susan's class, the students had come from another school where the teachers were editing the tests to make it look as if these students got all the answers right. So when these students then moved into Susan's class, where the answers were not edited, their scores just fell drastically.
Right.
Now, the data and the algorithm is great, but it could not figure this one out. It needs that
Right.
human input to understand why the data is what it is. So, let's say you want to go to somebody and tell them that data is a great tool, but insights matter. Suppose that's the point that you want to make. You could use this as an example to drive home that point.
Right.
And that's where the power of storytelling really comes out. Because if you just go and tell the school, no, no, it's not my fault, you should not be sacking me. The
Correct.
school is going to
Yeah.
say, okay, you're protesting, just go. But if you can actually not just bring the data, but bring the insight saying this is why it is happening, then
Got
you're
it.
making your point much more effectively. And like this in various walks of life, like when I work with businesses, a lot of the times, let's say the CEO sits in the ivory tower and doesn't have the ear to the ground. They're coming up with strategies and policies and all that, and we see that sometimes then it doesn't work out. So
Yeah.
how do you find, you can't now, with CEOs and board, how do you communicate to them that it's important to have your ear on the ground?
Right.
Or how do you tell your team that, oh, let's be out in the market, let's not just believe what's happening, let's be out in the market and find out.
Story.
And so you have to share an
Fair
example.
example.
So stories really sometimes, but what I say is that they don't change your mind, but it gives you a new perspective, and it's an invitation for you to listen.
Right. Right.
And then you have to listen and make your notes.
Right. Easier said than done, I'd say. Why? Because leaders with experience, 30 years of experience, they have real life examples to just go and, borrow and then just share it effortlessly, right? But or maybe a very well read person, maybe like you are. I can see a lot of books in your background. There's so much that you can borrow. So is it important when we talk about storytelling, is it a given that yes, one must be well read, or at least one must have a bank of information to borrow from? Something interesting. It not be like a robotic thing. Oh, you know what, I'm going to use storytelling, so I'm going to read so many books. But it's a part of your habit. Your lifestyle has to change for you to become a
Yeah.
storyteller, right?
Yeah. No, absolutely. You need a story bank that you can draw from. And the story bank could be your own personal experiences, your own stories. A lot of the time, and I've seen this happening both for personal branding and for storytelling, people, I don't have any story. I have no
Hmm.
experiences to share. Nothing happened to me. You get a lot of, but all of us have a rich life and rich experiences. There is a
Right.
background to why we are doing what we are doing, and there is,
Right.
and the other part of it, which is not about your own personal stories. Sometimes people are saying, no, I don't want to share my own stories. I'm
Hmm.
shy. But as an entrepreneur, you have stories of why your product came about.
Right.
You have a story
Right.
about what insight you got and why did you come to this position. You have a
Right.
story about a failure that happened. You have a story about a success that happened. you know So it need not be just your own stories, it could be stories of your products, of your services, which you could
Right.
showcase to talk about. It could be stories that you're seeing about others around you. So I think the quintessential element to being is being very observant and being curious.
Right.
When something happens, oh, is that so? Tell me more. Tell me what happened. Not just
Correct.
taking it from the base, but and I've seen this with a lot of leaders. They will just give a assertion statement. It'll be, it's always like this, I never do this, I went this. So it's statements like this. What makes you say that? Asking a question, and asking some great questions to dig deeper, to go and find out what happened. um
Right.
that's like, then you're helping peel the onion, so to say. But you're also then going and questioning to say, even in this case, the data example that I shared about Susan,
Right.
somebody had to go back and ask, why is this happening? Oh, Susan has all these great reviews, why is she still being let go? Somebody has to ask that question. So you need to
Right.
go deeper. And I
Right.
always think about, we all have this little bit of the whole curse of knowledge kind of thing. We say, oh, we know. And I remember Procter and Gamble in 2013, they were looking to create a low cost shaving razor for the India market. And but P&G, obviously a big name in the shaving razors market, right? They wanted to, but for this low cost razor, they want to attract, like, say, 500 million Indians who use that old fashioned T shaped razor, which has no protective piece of plastic and all that. So, what they did when they were doing it is they tested it on Indian students who were studying at MIT in Boston. But they never figured out what is happening. Why can't we get this right? Something was going wrong. It was not working out till they decided to go to India, go in the interiors, in the villages, and everywhere, and actually sit down on the ground and see how people shave. And
Mm.
typically, I mean, these days people are shaving with a pipe tap open and all that. But typically, in those days or whatever, people would sit on the ground. There'll be a mirror in front, there'll be a mug with a water.
Correct.
So people were not using the razors the same way the Indian students at MIT were using it. They were like,
Mm.
shaving and running their razor underwater, and that was taking out all the clog. Whereas when you do it like this, it won't go.
Right.
And it was that insight of going there and going and finding out, because they asked the question, what are we doing wrong? Why is this not working? I did try it on an Indian student. It's still not working. What is different? So you have to be innately curious about the small things and the big things, to go down and then go and ask what is happening, to get those stories. So it is story eliciting before you
Right.
actually can go and tell the story.
Right. Right. Right.
So I think that curiosity is, of course, there are loads of books, and there are loads of books which have stories. You have to be interested. The other day, and this is like a few years back, maybe, I was reading Economist, the magazine. So you read it for various reasons, but because now you're attuned to always looking what's interesting, what's nice, kind of thing, right? So there was an investment company which was talking about their investment strategy,
Okay.
and they gave an analogy to tennis. They said that our investment strategy is like the baseline game of Bogue. Bjorn Borg used to be an erstwhile tennis player who had a very steady game from the baseline. So they
Right.
gave that comparison, that analogy, and of course it's dated to a certain audience, but I can immediately get it.
Right.
So it doesn't matter whether you're in finance, you're in technology, or whatever, these common connections really help. I was teaching this course for product managers, tech product managers, on how to use storytelling. And one of the students said, my grandmom is immensely curious about what I do. And I want to be able to tell her what is machine learning. Now, normally when you go and if you open anything and say what is machine learning, it'll give you a lot of jargon around it.
Correct.
And over a period of time, what he really built was he said, oh, I gave this comparison because my grandmom cooks for us and she gets that. I said machine learning learns the same way as you try a new recipe, you make something and you feed it to us. I'm eating it and saying, oh, today the salt is too much. Oh, this is too spicy. Can you do something else? And then you take and you make that refinement. That is how the machine also learns. We are giving it some
Right.
input and it's learning. And that is machine learning. So I'm studying about how machines can do it. And the
Right.
grandmom, of course, got it.
Right.
So it's really jargon free communication, communication for your audience so that the
Yeah.
audience understand. But of course, if you're working in, say, you have all your IT colleagues around you, you can use a lot of those words that everybody gets. So it's
Yeah.
contextual. So it's importance of context setting, which knowing your audience, keeping it simple. And as it said, why do you have to use a $1 word when a 10-cent word would do?
Right. Soundri, talking about stories, can you share one story of what happens to be your hard sell if you had one? You would obviously keep pitching on to organizations, and a lot of trainers that I've spoken to, they say it's word of mouth, it's referrals, and all. But even after that, just because you're referred doesn't mean you're directly hired, right? You got to still go pitch, and then you still got to go convert. Has there been an instance, where you've had to really work a little harder for your sale?
I think lot of my in the last few years, a lot of the work that's come has been organic because I'm putting out a lot of my work on LinkedIn.
Right.
So a lot of it comes from queries coming from that, which converts and all that. But I think more than hard sell, I don't like that word. So I'm going to just say it differently. And I know what you
Sure.
meant. So I understand where you're coming from. Uh, I think really understanding where the client is. Sometimes the client is at a point where in their organizational journey, there's something happening, bigger happening. So a
Hmm.
lot of the time, say for instance, you'll get my biggest hit would be, we don't have budgets for this.
Yeah. Right.
And that's true for not just for trainers, that's true for everybody, every vendor
Yeah.
who goes, you go into
Hmm.
B2B sales, you go as a vendor, Fred. The budget is always the thing. So really, when you're looking at talking with an organization, especially in B2B kind of level, you have multiple buyers that you're catering to.
Right.
It is not just talking only to, say, the economy buyer, which is a finance buyer. You're also talking to the technology buyer. You're talking to the management buyer. So there is a whole lot of other stakeholders that you need to actually convince. And sometimes you don't have access to all of them.
Right.
So let's say today, I mean, Jagmohan, you're the buyer representative that I am chatting with today. Let's say, assume that, and I've told you something about my product, I've left something with you. You
Right.
need to be able to carry that to the others, and you're actually my sales point.
Correct.
You're also my representative who's going to carry it. So, what I leave with you is very important.
Hmm. Right.
And that is where, if I just give you sheets and sheets of data and why ROI on this will work or whatever, it doesn't translate just as well.
Right.
But if I leave you with that story of, this is where you were, we are going to be working on this together. Today, this product in this way, the way you're using it, it's giving you a lot of grief. As a client, you're really upset, it's bothering you, it's eating into your time. So, really understanding your pain points and then talking about, we are going to work on this together. And this is how your life is going to be transformed. So,
Right.
really painting that picture of that future reality where from this pain, you're going to go to, a smiley face, a happy situation where it's going to take away, it's going to really benefit you. What's in it for you? So
Right.
I have to leave that picture for the various stakeholders with the person that I'm speaking with.
Right.
So only when that is there, then that translation will happen in the sales process, right?
Right.
So I
Right.
have to leave you with a story that's rememberable. So if I just leave you with if I keep telling you that, you're going to, the cost saving on this is going to be 120 million, and then it's going to bring you an ROI of this within, of course, we all remember data. Data is part of our life. But when you have to translate it multiple times, it's going to lose its interest. So you have to paint a picture about where it's taking, and that sometimes having access to all the stakeholders and having that conversation and taking it to conclusion is all is that could be a constraint. So sometimes you realize that you've not actually understood some other issue that might be there for the client.
Right.
So, and staying in touch. I think I've had a couple of conversions which happened 3 years later from the time I first spoke with the client.
Okay.
It is a relationship that you're building over a period of time, believing in yourself and maintaining that relationship with the client as well.
Got it. Got it, Sandri. Um, Another thing I wanted to talk to you about was, now there is so much tool. Say, for example, you're connected to your clients. Uh, it could be through LinkedIn. Sometimes you keep it very professional and keep it just to LinkedIn, or sometimes it cannot be like that. You exchange numbers and you're on each other's WhatsApp, and then WhatsApp has got status, and for practicality purposes you cannot go and modify the settings. I want to show the status to this person, not to this person, and all that. And somewhere, being a solopreneur, where your personal life and your professional life
Yes.
mixes up, you need to run a balance of branding your personality in a certain way. So, also, since your expertise also lies a little bit on that, how have you personally kind of dealt with this, and how much is the right balance in your eyes as far as personal branding is concerned? What do you
Yeah.
share? What do you not share? Or do you not
Mm-hmm.
worry about it at all? Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's personal to each person's what each person is comfortable with. Boundary is also a definition by each person, right? For some
Right.
people, when they say it's an open book, it's really an open book. Some
Right.
people are not comfortable sharing beyond a point of time. It's one, being sensitive to understanding how it is, asking permissions, setting those boundaries. So actually creating a rules of engagement for yourself and asking what is a rule of engagement that the client will be comfortable with.
Right.
Say a lot of people in their email signature have their personal numbers, mobile numbers in, right? A lot of the times it's there.
Yeah.
um, I also used to have it, and then I think once I just changed my signature for some reason to add something else or a quote or something like this, and I removed that, and it's remained that way for now. So my personal number is not there in my email signature. It was not a conscious thing of taking it out, but I do, like when we connect on LinkedIn, first I do tell somebody to, put it on email, because for me, email is the easier way to track.
Right.
Definitely, I find that sometimes if I read a message and I'm on the go somewhere and doing something, I might forget replying. So
Right.
this
Right.
worry of forgetting is very much there. So email, at least, it's very obvious way of doing it. I do take conversations then on to WhatsApp over a period of time. There are lots of my clients that I chat with on WhatsApp. Um, but I think specifying, say for instance, not getting worried. It's one of those things, right? You send a message to a friend, the friend has read it, and you ask something, and the friend doesn't reply for hours on end. Oh my God, what is that person thinking about me? What is happening? And that overthinking part of it, just avoiding that by setting the rules of engagement. For
Right.
instance, we work today, all of us work across different time zones,
Right.
right? So some mail that somebody has sent actually had a signature which clearly said, I'm working on different time zones. I'm also working asynchronously. I'm on flexi hour. I'm working on asynchronous. Please don't feel compelled to reply.
Mm.
So setting some of these rules of engagement, or saying, just for example, if you're working with a team of people, saying, this is how I like to work. If you want to block my calendar, this is what I want you to do. If you want to
Right.
do this, so actually sometimes we assume some of these things,
Right.
but all of our styles are different. So I think it's really good to be communicative and over communicative. um, Again, these days when everybody is working hybrid, partly working from home and office and anything, really stating what works. So you're not leaving people to assume things, you're not
Right.
leaving them feel uncomfortable as well, saying what happened. Also saying, if you urgently need me to respond on something, please mark it in red, mark it urgent, call me on my mobile. Don't wait for the
Right.
mail reply, call me. I block process my emails only between 3 and 5. So if there's something urgent in the morning, call me.
Right.
Um, Earlier, people were able to even draw the boundaries even better. I remember somebody senior, very senior in Hinsan Lever, would say that after 10 p.m., you just can't reach me. That's it.
Right.
So, and this person, and which seems very normal, 10 p.m. seems late and all that. But in these days when everybody is working at different time zones and all that, I mean, you might have, if you're sitting in India, you might have Europe waking up earlier and later and things like that. It could be something happening, but he had a strict rule. Now, in
Right.
today's day, that may or may not be possible. So, having what is the escalation process?
Mm.
I won't be available. If I'm not available, this is how. And as again, as a CEO, I remember Steelcase, the CEO of Steelcase, Jim Keynes, I think his name is. He had said in one interview that some decision to actually close a factory happened in the night when he was sleeping. He had really empowered his entire team with parameters and decisions and saying, I trust you with it. And that had happened.
Right.
So, how can you work towards some of this now, depending upon your work stage, your position in the organization, and all that? Some of this will be possible, some of it will not be possible. But what can you start working on? And I think if you have a list of 10 things, what are the things that can come in now? Might be a good way of creating that rules of engagement.
Got it. Um, Now, in a training or where you kind of interact with a lot of people, right? It could be in person, it could be online. We had this pandemic, which kind of it, now to look at it, it seems like before pandemic and post pandemic. That's how it looks like. Before pandemic, were you still doing online teaching, online mentoring, or was it just in person?
I was doing some of it, but it was only from 2018
Right.
onward. Especially for some of the work that I do in India, they know that I don't travel. They know my sort of know that I'm based out of Hong Kong.
Right.
And I think over a period of time, definitely with the teams being dispersed, so Zoom didn't was not a product which came up during the pandemic. Zoom was already existent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And especially because in, say, just for example, in IT industry, people already always worked away. They worked in client locations, they worked offsite. This
Right.
on-site offsite thing was a routine thing. It was not a new concept.
Right.
Just that people are much more accepting of it. In traditional office related roles, people are doing. So I was doing some of it, but it started as late as 2018.
18. Right.
I was doing some of my volunteering work online. That started even earlier.
Okay.
I work with some NGOs in the interiors of Tamil Nadu. And for them, it was always, because again, the students are coming from different districts and logging in. So it was always a login part of it. And I mean, I must say that it's really I've learned to definitely day one when somebody said you have to do a session online. How will I communicate the vibes? How will I do it? And how will I really keep that energy? You learn for this also you learn the ways to keep it engaging. For me, as I'm talking to you now, I know you're on this other side of the screen and you are like in faraway Bangalore. But really using my hands, connecting with
Yeah,
the eyes and leaning in, and that vibe, it's almost exactly like how I would be in person.
in
um you
person.
know
Yeah,
um Being comfortable replicating it.
right.
There used to be this joke earlier, when at the beginning of the pandemic, my friends who had to do things on screen would keep a photo above the video, photo of their partner, of their friend, something. They would keep a photo above the video camera screen, so that it looks as if they're talking to somebody, because they were not used to talking to a screen.
Got it.
uh,
Okay, that's the
yeah,
first
but
time I'm
really
hearing.
didn't need
Okay,
that.
right.
Now, yeah.
I was gonna get to engagement, but before that, I'll just go take a detour a little bit. I'll come to this engagement part. Uh, there were times when you did in person. There's a reason I'd like to talk about in person and then come to online. Um, I've spoken to a couple of trainers before, and somebody said for a trainer they have their own performance pressure, right? It's a performance for them, and it's direct validation. You don't even have to ask people if it's interesting or not. Just the energy in the room says a lot, right? And let's say when you have a training delivery that you have to for as long as, say, 4 hours, or a 1 day training modules and stuff like that. How have you evolved yourself to become comfortable with, sometimes it'll work, sometimes it's not going to work. It's as simple as that, right? Now sometimes you'll know in the first 30 minutes nothing is working, and probably there's a crowd mismatch and stuff like that. Has those things happened to you? How have you handled it, Sound?
No, no, definitely. One, I see myself as a consultant and a facilitator rather than as a trainer.
Okay.
So it might be semantics, it might be words, but it helps me be much more human in the room, and have a group conversation rather than act as if I'm a trainer and there's a trainee kind of a thing. So I think
Right.
mentally that changes the dynamics as well.
Hmm.
It might sound semantics, but I think it's important
Right.
for how the room approaches you and how you approach the room as well.
Right.
Because
Right.
you're here co creating content, and you're also co learning and creating those learning experiences, part of it. I'll just leave that for now. When I first came into Hong Kong, so this is like in 2006, one of the initial sessions was with a very local Hong Kong company. I was
Okay.
coming in from the Middle East, but before that in India is where I had attended a lot of sessions and conversations and all that. So I walk into this room and it's all like all of them are there. It's the first time I'm ever running a session. It was
Right.
going to be a full day session. So I'm already thinking, what do we do? A lot of preparation happened before,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
still, you're just reading the room. You're also reading the room. So I go in and I say something. We start with an icebreaker activity, and I say, "Who'd like to volunteer for this?" And I was used to, in India or in even the Middle East, everybody jumping up and like, so many hands up, and then literally people talking over each other. We say that in India, we don't wait for the conversation to end. That's like on overlays,
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
over the
Yeah.
other, right? But nothing, no noise, no hand up, no quiet, silent as a pin drop. I don't want to rush it. I don't want to, but I'm slowly starting to feel uncomfortable. But you're managing that nervousness kind of a thing. I say, okay, again, who'd like to go for it? What? Stunned silence. And I'm just thinking, oh my God, what am I, what do I do? How do I connect? Is it a language thing? Am I talking too fast? So, one of the things that I learned to do in the initial years is to slow down my speaking,
Mm. Right.
because language and accent can also be a barrier to communication, right?
Right.
So I
Right.
don't want that speed, which is what we're used to, speaking with you now. I can speak at a certain speed.
Right.
When I want to be understood with a different audience, I need. So I slowed down, made those changes. But I also realized that sometimes they won't be the first to do it. It's a too open a thing for one individual to get up and do
Right.
something.
Right. Right.
So how can you create smaller groups where it is
Hmm.
a more group thing, they're talking and then getting a group to
Right.
engage. So
Right.
really working around some of this, and I've seen this play out even at an organizational level. So there's this friend of mine, he was a CFO of a large organization and he used to cover the Asia Pacific region. They were making a change in the way they would do accounting in the organization, how they
Hmm.
were going to account for. So he was going around to all the Asia Pacific offices and making those presentations.
Right.
So he went to Bangkok, he did the presentation, worked out very well. He went to Indonesia, worked out very well. Then he went to Japan and he did the same presentation, and nobody would. And he said, any feedback for me? Do you think it's going to work? What's happening? Nothing.
Okay.
And he had a tight deadline. He had to make the presentation. He had a flight to catch right after, but he's
Hmm.
not getting the response because he also needs to take the
Yeah.
response. And I
Yeah.
mean, that's the whole purpose of
Right.
going and making that in person thing. And he could see that something was wrong. So he actually called the lead in the team there. He just called him aside and say, I can see that I'm not connecting. There's something wrong with what is happening. What do you suggest I do? Because I have this deadline, I need to finish it. What he said? He said, in Japan, nobody is going to come up and tell you that something is wrong or something is happening straight off. Why don't you do one thing? Why don't we put these charts up on the wall? We'll give them post-its, let them talk in their individual groups, and then we'll get them to put something together. And then I will coordinate talking about everything that is there and I will bring it forward. Do you think that
Right.
will work for you? And he said, yes, please. So you have to change your style constantly. It doesn't matter whether you're a consultant trainer. It happens in organizations. As
Right.
you are a team lead and you're going and do it, you have to do that.
Got it. Got it, Sandri. Um, Another thing, I just want to go back to the point you made before you explained all this, right? You said you don't look at it like, you're a trainer and there are a bunch of mentees and stuff like that. You just make it one group thing. um, Even that, let's say, even as a consultant also, where you're not really addressing at people, you're working with them, are there any in your experience, have you developed a routine, a couple of exercises where you spend 15-30 minutes in the start to build that connection before you kind of, before they talk freely to you and stuff like that? Can you share a little bit?
No, always, always. I think one, you would have typically in a consulting assignment, you would have done a lot of series of conversations before you come to something which is like, say, an intervention or something like that.
Right.
So before you go into the session, you would have had a whole series of conversations. I was working with a sales team of an organization, and I mean, it had about 100 people there. We were all there together. I didn't know anybody when I went in. So one of the first few things I do is for me to feel also comfortable and for them to is just walk
Yeah.
around and say hello. Because
Hmm.
if you, let's say it's a conference room and everybody is sitting and you're standing at one end, there is that invisible barrier.
Right. Right.
But once you make that effort to actually go and connect and even
Hmm.
just say hello and ask them and have a little bit of a casual conversation, jokes or whatever, and make yourself available for that
Right.
conversation.
Right.
Typically in conferences and all that, you can find groups forming and people moving.
Yeah.
People will go and sit at one particular table and have lunch, and that's it. I will take my lunch plate around and go and sit at multiple tables at that time.
Right. Right. Right.
And that's a good way to build a. I mean, I think it's again back to that whole thing that we talked about being curious.
Yes.
What are people's motivations? Why are they here today? Why are they with this organization? What's
Right.
driving them? And change organization and a lot of changes happening everywhere, right? So how are people dealing with it? What is happening in their mind? And I always say this when we look at, say, digital transformation or something, sometimes organizations present it as if, oh, we are going to be the most digitally enabled organization in the world. We'll be the leading company in the world. As an employee, I may not care about that.
Right.
How do you align my value to the organizational mission?
Right.
How is it going to change my life? By bringing this change, you were earlier having to do XYZ, and that was taking ABC time. That was causing this kind of thing. The reports were not coming okay. Let's say you were migrating something as simple as, you were using erstwhile Lotus 123 and you're going to migrate to Excel or something like that.
Right.
This was what is happening. The output was not coming out in the format you wanted. You had to spend a lot of time. So you were spending till 1 a.m. in the morning doing that. Now, this tool is going to help you do this better. It's going to free your time. So you can look at the output, you can look at the analysis. And this is exactly what happened with me when I joined Lipton and I was a management accountant. We used to get all these data dumps and we had to manually collate them together in outdated software and things like that, and that took so much of my time. I would be working till 2 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning. And so when the reports came out, I wouldn't look at the reports because I didn't have the time. And that's
Right.
maybe an excuse now, but I'm just saying I just didn't have the time. So I would
Got it.
go into the meeting and I wouldn't have looked at the insight behind the data. So how
Right.
can you create those? So if somebody had told me, don't use this, but use this because that's going to relieve your time. You're going to get reliable data, reliable output, and you'll have time to read the data and go with insights, go better prepared for the meeting. That's my motivation for that transformation.
Right.
That's my buy-in. So really looking at from people's perspective, from what's in it for them, why are they doing what they are doing, and hence looking at how can you make their lives better. There's this very interesting incident that happened. This lady Frances Frey, who works in Harvard Business School, she talks about it in her book Unleashed. So in a certain hospitals, the nurses were leaving their jobs. Disproportionate number of them were leaving their jobs, more than,
Okay.
let's say, if the industry turnover level is 1%, in that hospital the industry turnover level was 40%, something like that.
Wow.
I'm
Okay.
just giving just for
Got it.
showing the
Got it. Yeah.
disproportion.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they went and said, what is happening? And what was actually happening is, I mean, take a guess. What do you think could have been the reason? I know
Why were
why.
nurses? Maybe they did not have a. I don't know. A hospital should have like proper restrooms or something,
No,
or
good guess. Good
they
guess. So
were
it was not the boss, it was not the restroom, it was not that. The problem was that they didn't have good photocopying machines. And you'll think why? Because at the end of every stint, their session, they had to go and make the copies of the reports. So they'll go to their floor, they'll go to the photocopier would not be working. So they'd have to climb up stairs, go up 2 floors, find a working photocopier. And as the nurses went up and down the stairs like that, they would all look at each other and roll their eyes and say, we are very valued here.
right.
So something as small as
Small
that,
as that. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Hmm.
mean, anybody had asked me this question, I wouldn't have ever guessed it was a photocopier. I would have said restroom, definitely, like you. I would have
Yeah.
said cafeteria. I would have, I mean, we would have started with a bad boss and gone down these routes. Wouldn't have- But something as small as, so sometimes you have to look at, and she calls it indignities that are happening to people in organizations.
Right. 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 Right.
What
Right.
are
Right.
these
Right.
small indignities that are happening as a leader, as an organization person? Sit down, make notes, and ensure that you remove that so that people can work in a very happy, productive manner, the way they want to work, and
Right.
not be bothered by these.
I could literally think of so many people and so many companies in India, as you said that, and it's only, I don't know, in India, it's not even a thing yet, I guess. I mean, it's like, what? Come on, it's just a sort of a thing. But okay, hopefully someday we treat these small things as very important factors in, outputs for companies. Um, Probably my last topic that I'm going to touch upon, of course, is going to have a little bit of subtopics under that, Soundari. So let's, your transition into doing things online. Let me not use any word attached, right? Training or consulting, anything. Doing things online, because connecting with people when you're working with people is the most important thing. And when you first started doing it online, how was it? Did you take some time to adjust? You wouldn't know how the other person is thinking or feeling or seeing. There's so much missing for you on a video. So how did
Yeah,
you manage, and how have you kind of um, come to terms with that now that we've gone mainstream online?
yeah, yeah. I think, I think figuring out the technology and the ways of working was very key. And I was quite, I did a lot of research. I was attending, so I went through this whole thing of webinar, like I think between March 2020 and May
Yeah,
2020, I
yeah,
attended every webinar that there was. And I'm sure that was true for a lot of people. And not just attended at odd times, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. So, I mean, I was just randomly on it, just trying to figure out what the heck is happening, kind of thing. And in the process, I got access to a lot of technology and tools and how people are doing things and all that. So, right from just piling up books to put lights on, getting a ring light, getting a standing desk, using multiple screens, where chat is going on, then as you get used to one technology or one app, some other app works differently.
yeah.
During this time in between, I was also doing sessions in the Middle East for a organization where they were using one particular software which had very restricted usage. So actually spending a lot of time back end with their tech team to understand it, to see how I can get some of it to use for, like, say I want breakout sessions.
Right,
They had never used breakout in that particular software ever.
right, right,
So they also had to figure out, I also had to figure out.
right,
Then if you wanted to put external links,
right.
yes, no, not. Now we have so much of integration over this, and but I think it, it connected me to a lot of people. There were few people who reached out and said, "Can you do beta on this for us? Can you do the testing?" So I tested out a few
Wow.
platforms. I
Okay.
logged in and connected and tested out a few platforms. Then there's this other friend of mine who uses something called as a Stream Alive, which is a really nice platform. Plug for my friend, and um, which basically helps you navigate through all the chats and all that, and it brings it in visual format for people
Hmm.
to, as a facilitator, it's a great way to get to
Hmm.
know your audience, because sometimes you're asking a question and the chat is flying, you can't
Right,
read it at all. This
right,
actually captures all that and puts it in various formats.
right,
So really experimenting with a lot of that technology and tools and trying it, having the screen, having the standing desk and all those kind of things. Having said that, I also realized that yes, technology is important, the standing desk is great and all that, but there are so many workarounds to do. I remember during that time in December 2021, I was traveling in the US and I had gone to visit a school friend of mine, and I found that he was using an ironing table to create a standing desk.
right.
And of course, it works. Why do you need anything more than that? You move it up and down an ironing table and it works, right? So, really being not restricting yourself to only this or that,
Right.
exploring everything, doing all that testing. So, I tested this platform called Butter, and
Butter.
their
Okay.
whole tagline was make meetings as smooth as
Smooth.
butter. And it's still, they're still
Nice.
there, they've brought in a lot of changes. And but I remember that message that came from the founder saying, do you want to test it, it's there for free, it's for this. So I used it in a lot of things. Then I realized some things are working in it, some things were still under development. You get used to one platform, like a lot of us got used to Zoom, say.
Right. Right.
Then now you realize that Zoom is not even, it's only free for 45 minutes between even two people. Earlier, between two people, three
It
people, it
was
was
unlimited.
unlimited
Yeah.
and all that. So platforms change and all that. So really navigating, understanding, but not being guided by the platform, but be guided by the experience that you want to create.
Right.
That was the journey. Um, initially we were guided by the platforms because we were just exploring and figuring out the
Yeah.
platforms,
Yeah.
right? So it was more like, oh, how do I understand this? And then a lot of people running sessions on, oh, Zoom 101 and this one and that one, and things like that. So it was more, then you say that, no, this is the experience I want to create. Um, the engagement, this is the level of engagement I want to have. What are the tools which are going to help me with that rather than being driven by the tools? So
Great.
that was the journey, and I'm sure it's sort of pretty much might have been mirroring a lot of people's journeys as well on this.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would connect with the point or even find it a very eye-opening thing that, you mentioned that don't let the platform guide your process or your work. Rather you fix an experience and search for a platform that probably helps you out execute that experience. Soundari, one final thing. As far as your business goes, right? It could be training, consulting, coaching. What is your online toolkit look like? What does it look like at this moment? And what are some of the gaps that you still face?
Can you explain that a little bit more? Like when you say online toolkit,
Meaning,
what do I use?
what are the tools that you use? Say, for example, Zoom. I see
Hmm,
that is one of the things that you go to, and
hmm,
then
hmm,
within
hmm,
Zooms you mentioned within Zoom you mentioned a lot of things, right? Like
hmm,
breakout
hmm,
rooms,
hmm.
you use external links and all that. Now,
Right.
you I don't know if you can share
Hmm,
what are
hmm,
the different tools or softwares that you use, and what are, despite all this, what are still the gaps that you see? What is the scope of
right.
improvement that you're expecting
Right.
from?
Right.
Yeah,
No, no. So I love experimenting with any of the tools and technology and all, and I do feel everything is worth trying once.
great,
There's a cost angle to it if there's a cost angle, but a lot of the technology that we are talking about, there is no cost attached to it or whatever. So in terms of social media, it's primarily guided through LinkedIn. That's my go-to thing, and I feel it's good to stick to one and solidify. Having said that, obviously each of these platforms can also start making it difficult for you. So, just for example, oh, we allow this but not this. If you want to do this, you have to go pro, you have to go premium, you have to go this kind of thing. So, really figuring out what is it that you can do on your own. So,
right,
I know that a lot of people, while they love writing, they prefer to keep it their own blog. So Substack has become a
right,
big thing now, right? People use Notion for creating plans and things like that. So I've tried all of those part of it. I also use Evernote to keep some of the all the stories that I collect. They're all parked on Evernote. They're tagged so that if I say, okay, what is a story that I want to tell about a tech entrepreneur? So I can actually look at those hashtags and pull it out because you'll remember some of it. There
correct.
are
Yeah,
some, but you'll forget some of the details as well.
right.
And stories have to be specific for them to be authentic. So, just brushing up and preparing for that. I was using Twitter for social media for a bit, but I've gone off it a little bit now. I don't think I'm getting onto threads. I don't think Clubhouse was a momentary lapse of judgment, that kind of thing. So I think that as many as like on the from a professional part of it, I stick to LinkedIn. I have a YouTube a channel where I also post my videos, and my website should be out this weekend or hopefully. I've been
Wow.
sitting on.
Okay.
Well, we are very good at creating content for others. Sometimes we are not great at creating
Yeah.
content
Yeah.
for ourselves. So the website should also be out. I've been working on it for some time now, on and off. So that's that part. Then in terms of the other tools, say for instance, streaming platforms.
Right.
Um, Starting tomorrow for 4 weeks, along with another partner, we are talking about these conversations about AI and communications. So
Right.
we are doing that on StreamYard. We are streaming it on LinkedIn and
Hmm.
on YouTube, part of it. So again, using some of this platforms, experimenting it, which are the ones, Riverside, I got to know through you now. But checking out what works for your purpose,
Right. Right.
and usage. Stream Alive is again another platform that I I really recommend and use a lot for large scale engagements.
Got it.
And it has versions for you to do in person, hybrid, or fully online as well. I've been experimenting it in few of my sessions, and
Hmm.
it takes you have to just figure out the navigation.
Right.
What still is, if I have to say, is one back is we have, like, just for example, let's say a session is going on, I want to do a poll right now. Let's say I do Slido or Mentimeter or something, or build in a poll on Stream Alive has everything integrated. I would like one thing where there is no change of interface.
Right.
My presentation is there. If I use a presentation, I can see the audience. Maybe I need a giant screen, like a cinema screen kind of thing,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
everything is there. But some way where I can really have that all together. So I'm not
Hmm.
toggling screens, I'm not missing chats, I'm not missing reactions.
Right.
I mean, as such, everybody is a small pixel on the screen. But if I
Correct.
can find a way to, that would be great. I know a lot of platforms are working on a lot of those integrations, like, say, for instance, when you want to use a Miro board, you can do
Yeah.
it on now Zoom, and you can have it. But I still find the interface clunky,
Right.
and that is something that I would be really happy to see change.
Got it.
Or one integrated thing, which where I don't need to go anywhere else.
Got it, Santri. So your work involves mostly, am I correct? Please correct me if I'm wrong. It mostly involves live interactive platforms, correct? Like Zoom or StreamYard or stuff like that. There's nothing that happens outside of this live interaction. Is there no connection with your, participants after your sessions?
Um, I said, no, I mean, there's also learning platforms or online platforms. It could be recorded webinars, which are there. But, like, say, typically in a university kind of a thing, there'll be a learning platform that you're also part of.
Right.
And then there is content going there, there's to and fro access there, even with organizations.
Right.
Some people use Google Classroom, some people use Slack or whatever. So you're
You're
part of
given
different
access to their platforms.
for that purpose,
Purpose. Got
while
it.
maintaining their internal privacy and everything else. For that purpose, then that way, that gives you a way to say, I did a personal branding session for a IT company. We did it across locations and all that. It was over a period of time.
Right.
So how do you see what is building,
Right.
what are the kind of things that are coming up, so you have access to it, and then you have a common place where you're posting. Then I would send something interesting that I read, which might be relevant for them. So there's that exchange that happens. Some
Got
of
it.
it then happens in a small WhatsApp group, um,
Yeah.
which is
Why
created where
not?
you're
Yeah.
interacting through that. So it varies. The interaction levels and access varies, but it's more continuous. It's not just that one time on screen or six times on screen, but it's, I mean, at one of the universities that I teach, even people from the previous batches are still in touch, and LinkedIn is a platform that they use, or some of them have my WhatsApp number, so they'll say, oh, I really use this came in handy, I got this job, I've changed jobs, and this has happened, and what you said on that day really came in handy, something like that, something really meaningful and rich, but
Right.
a way of keeping in touch, beyond, over and beyond those one sessions, 10 sessions, 6 months, where you still stay connected.
Got it. Got it, Sandri. Thank you for that. Just one thing, you just told something which, I have to dig a little deeper on that. You said you did a personal branding exercise for an IT company. Now, please correct me. I think I'm somewhere misaligned. I was thinking, okay, personal branding is for individuals. Of course, there is personal branding for each and every human being on this planet. That's one thing. But today, mostly personal branding is spoken about for small business owners, who are like solopreneurs. They need to kind of brand themselves because the business is around them. Now, you said you did a personal branding session for an IT company. That means you address their employees. What is the connection here?
Yeah, for the employees to build their personal brand, but use it in the context of how they engage with their clients.
Right, right, right,
Because
right.
you're
Got
also
it.
the face of the company, you're also representing your
Yeah,
deep knowledge in the
right,
domain,
right.
right? So when you're working with an organization, there is your brand and your organization's brand that you're taking with you.
Correct.
So building on one helps build the other automatically. Say you go on LinkedIn and you write
Right.
about an article about some expertise that you have, how you're working on AI integrating into your thing, which is going to
Right.
affect your clients. You're
Right.
building your brand and your organization's brand that way.
Got it. Got it, Soundari. Yeah. The companies also will want you to communicate certain best practices. The companies would want their employees to represent themselves in a way which aligns with the company's principles and policies and stuff like that. Got it.
Right.
Great.
Right.
Uh,
And these are your
just
talent pool, right? These are your absolute talent pool. It's also a great way for them. And I feel, especially in the tech space and engineers and all that, um, you have a lot of content that you are creating because it's say, a research oriented domain or something that you're working on. But maybe the showcasing of that content is not always happening.
right.
So sometimes you don't know, oh, are you really working on this? We wanted to do this.
Hmm.
And how can you
This
really communicate across even your divisions within the organization so that it doesn't become siloed? Information does not stay at one place, but it transfers knowledge.
got it. This begs another quick question. Are we seeing a near future or some point in future where LinkedIn profiles of employees will be owned by their employers in a certain way? Has that ever come up in your sessions by employees, who've raised dissent or something?
Hmm. Uh, there's always been that bit of hesitation from employees to go on LinkedIn because they're not sure where they will be positioned as or how they
Right.
will be seen. Is it mine? Is it this? Is it that?
Yeah, yeah.
And all our identities are also pretty confused, right? We are people, we are working in organizations, we are, just for example, parents, tennis players, doing other artists, marathon runners. There's so many avatars of us which are there, so it's really difficult to filter that through. So I think it's very important for organizations to have a clear communication policy which they talk about to their employees. Again, back to that little bit of the rules of engagement,
Right,
a part of
right.
it, and actively encourage them to put themselves out.
Mm,
Sometimes, oh, I thought this was not allowed.
mm,
Assumptions and
right,
queries. And I think so it's important to have a rule book, a guidebook for
right.
organizations. So you're building those guardrails on engagement. What are you showcasing? And that might be a good conversation as an induction package to have.
Right, right.
And so that the employees also know, like somebody might be very active on LinkedIn or not so active on LinkedIn. Just for
Yeah,
example, before they moved, oh, in my previous organization, it worked like this,
right, right. Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You're carrying the legacy of some of that as well. So I think it's good to have that guardrails and be open to discussion about what is there, so that I mean, you have great talent in organizations. It's a shame if they can't be showcased.
Sure. Okay, right, right,
And it's a shame for them also. I think it's a lot of, you learn a lot by reading content of others. Back to also that give, share, help. It's a great
right,
mentoring tool,
right.
right? So if you can do it in an organized fashion, it will work.
Got it, Soundri. Thank you so much. It's been, I think I'm going to end it here. If there's anything that you want to share, probably you can take as much time as you want. If you want to communicate to people where they can reach out to you, or if there's anything else you want to add on to the work, to communicate about the work that you do, please.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, we can send some links on the show notes, maybe. But
Absolutely.
the
Yeah.
one thing that, the one thing that I mean, these are times of tremendous change that's happening, right? All of us go through periods of confusion. We are all turning into beginners again. So we have to get comfortable with that effort, struggle, and confusion so that we can come out on the other side, but be comfortable with that and take that leap. Part of it. The other side of it is, of course, like I said, uh, bringing yourself and your stories out to the world, both from a personal level and from your organizational level. is a skill, it's a muscle that needs to be built. So that also can be uncomfortable, but staying with that discomfort as well as you go on to build your stories, build psychologists always say you can show people all the charts that you want, but that won't change their perception of risk or their decision. What will change their minds is either going through an event themselves or knowing somebody that has. So sharing that example, sharing that story is very important.
Right.
I don't think it's a art. A lot of people think storytelling is an art. It's a practiced art. You're not just born or anything. You have to hear
Yeah.
stories,
Yeah.
you have to live the stories. So it's a bunch of experiences, right? It's as simple as saying, here's something that happened to me yesterday.
Yeah.
So just getting comfortable doing that. So we are building that culture all around us. And about contacting me and all, we can share some definitely LinkedIn is a good place to contact, as I said, and we can send in some links of my YouTube channel and all on the show notes maybe.
Sure. And that one muscle that you spoke about, having the skill to be able to share uh, balance between your professional and personal life, I think that's going to be a talking point not very far from now. It's going to pretty much be a defining point for a lot of people.
No, absolutely. And I think that balance has become even more important to me now at my life stage, current life stage. And it will vary for people at different life stages.
Right. Right.
What we define as balance, integration, whatever the word he wants to use
Right.
again,
Right.
you will have to evolve it. You'll have to carve it for yourself. It can't be because somebody else is doing it or somebody is working in a certain way. You can be inspired by others,
Right.
but you have to walk on your own path and create your path.
Agreed. Thank you, Soundari. It was a pleasure talking to you. There are so many things that I think can just the things that you mentioned can make a topic for a podcast by itself. Probably, down the line for a part two. Let's see if we can do that.
Yeah,
But
thank
thank
you
you,
so much, Mohan, for making it so comfortable and easy to chat. It's like, it's been a pleasure, and thanks for asking great questions. That makes the difference.
thank you so much, Soundari.